All right, everybody, we're back. Hold on a minute while I jump off the chopper. There we are. You, those listening on the podcast out there, don't get to hear the thrilling helicopter landing music that we have here. It's quite exciting, at least for me. Anyway, folks, thanks for joining us again this week. Another week of, interesting times. Times that we almost could have predicted were going to happen for the last few weeks, and they had come to fruition. It's very sad to see what's happening in the Ukraine, those poor people. I mean, war in any time is a terrible thing. We have, I think, forgotten what it's like, frankly, in our country. We know, but I mean, in terms of having it happen on our own soil. And that's a good thing, to go through an invasion where people from another country, even though the Russians tend to say that Ukraine is not another country, and, do what they want. This is the sad thing about watching these prancing fools we have in control of our government right now act as though some sorts of bits and pieces of paper and rhetoric and scolding and finger wagging and all that kind of stuff is going to make a whit of difference to someone who is hell-bent on military action. It encourages it. It doesn't discourage it. It's a display of weakness that encourages the wolf, and that's what Putin is. He's a wolf. I get tired of people saying, oh, he's a thug. Putin is not a thug per se. He's not foolish. He doesn't lash out wildly. He isn't dim-witted. He's quite bright. I know that President Trump's been picking up a lot of criticism from the left because he said that Putin's pretty cagey. And he is. He may have overstepped here a little bit. He certainly is a person who is not at all connected to humanity. He doesn't care about other people's suffering. He's more interested in his own glory, or what he perceives to be his legacy, I think, and places that high above the suffering of other humans. That's a bad person, but doesn't make you stupid. This characterization of him that way just makes us less likely to be able to deal with him, especially when it's come from extremely stupid people on our side of the ball. So, I mean, that makes it even worse. Look what we have out here. What do we have? Joe Biden, who, by the way, hasn't been on time for any kind of press conference or any of these important speeches. I don't know for how long. I don't know how long it's taking them to get him in the hyperbaric chamber, to get all of the IV solutions into him, hook the battery charging cables up to him, give him that jolt to get him out the door for half an hour. But it must be taking longer than they expect because he's always late and he's got nothing to say. This last press conference he had on, what day was it? Thursday, I guess, where he was actually asked if he thought these sanctions, which by the way are not particularly serious. The first round were extremely unserious. The second round were moderate. And we'll see if anything else comes out of them. They were asking if they thought that some reporter asked him, and I don't think it was Steve Doocy even from Fox. It might have been, but there were several reporters asking him hard questions. I was stunned. But they asked him if they thought that these sanctions were comparable to bombs and bullets. And then Biden just waited a couple of beats and then said, yes. That scared me more than half the other things that are happening in the world. What is going on in that brain? Is it just like cobwebs and moths flying around in there? I mean, is that what's happening? Because it sure feels that way. But let's talk for a minute about how this happened. Here is a war that is financed by climate change. I posted something on the website at politicalviking.com, a story from Forbes that just talks about where we get our oil from. But 2 years ago, really 18, 19 months ago even, we were a net exporter of oil. We were, for a while, the world's largest exporter of oil and natural gas. Now that we have stopped drilling on federal lands, and Biden even signed another executive order even further narrowing the ability to get fossil fuels, if you want to call them that, out of the ground in federal lands the other day, because he's a fool. And this is what's financing this war to a very large extent. We were exporting oil all over the world. We weren't dependent on anybody else, obviously. We were selling it to our friends, if I'd say that with a slight bit of air quotes around it, in Europe. They weren't buying it from Putin. And now they have to buy it from Putin, and so do we. Putin is now the third largest supplier of oil to the United States. He's slightly ahead of Saudi Arabia. I would encourage you to go to the website at Political Viking and take a look that, of the top four, it's Mexico and Canada are above Putin, and then it's Putin and then Saudi Arabia. We are purchasing about 595,000 barrels of oil just from Russia every day. Just from Russia. 595,000 barrels. And if you want to multiply that out to, say, $75 to $85 a barrel as an average, what's been going on for the last year, then you get in the neighborhood of, $17 billion, something in there. It buys a lot of tanks. And that's just our piece. Because when we quit selling oil, we no longer had any oil to sell, then the Germans, and to some extent the French, and other people in Europe had to start buying oil from Putin. Or Iran, but they're buying a lot of it from Putin. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline, there's already one pipeline. That's Nord Stream 2. Look up why it's called Nord Stream 2. Is already built. This was pointed out in a press conference the other day when they were talking, I think it was Ned Price, that prancing idiot who, talks down to everybody. He and Jen Psaki got, I think, in a room and practiced talking down to people. From the State Department was saying, well, we put a stop to that, right? This and that. The Germans can't go on that way. The pipeline's already built. Doesn't have anything going through it yet, but it's already built. We gave the go-ahead on that a while back, so it got finished. How long do you think it's going to sit there without anything flowing through it if people in Europe start running out of gas? As much as they're paying for it, they're still going to run out of it. And Germany, as I said, this is the war that climate change financed. Germany started shutting down their nuclear reactors because of, I'm not even sure it's climate change. They're just afraid of nukes, even though it's not Fukushima there, It's not a 40-year-old reactor sitting by the ocean waiting for a tidal wave to come in. And started using more, oil and natural gas. And who are they buying them from? Well, they were buying it from us. Not anymore. They're buying it from Russia. And as I said, Iran. Putin doesn't have any money. He doesn't have that kind of economy. His economy is roughly the size, it's a tiny bit smaller, I believe, than Italy's. Okay? It's about $1 trillion a year. We're $23 trillion a year economy just here. Europe is about 100. Now, we're a $23 trillion economy, which sounds like a lot until you start thinking that our national debt is $30 trillion. Stop printing money, parenthetically. So we have financed this war. Putin doesn't make these moves until he gets money. Let us turn to our old friends, the Romans, who had solved and went through a lot of these problems a long time ago, and if we pay attention to them, we would learn something. A Roman saying, war burns gold. In other words, without gold, without money, without financing, you can't have wars. That's what happened to Putin before. When we were energy sufficient and selling other people so they weren't spending him money, he couldn't afford to do what he's doing now. Now he can. And it doesn't appear to be any way to shut it off. Our sanctions are not going to be enough. We need, if you want to do something to him, start drilling, start fracking, start pumping our own oil, and start selling it to other people. That will slow him down faster than anything. But we're not going to do that. Because we're too worried about something that apparently doesn't really exist. Climate change. Put forth by a bunch of people who can't tell you the weather 3 days from now, are going to tell you what the temperature is going to be in 100 years. That's where we're happening. And now we have a war because we've been following that, quote, science. I'll be back.